good afternoon from me, Matthew Pearce, sitting in the offices of Skybound Capital in Cape Town. And I've had the pleasure of dealing with a number of our panelists today. Welcome to this webinar, The Impact of COVID-19 on Retail and Why Customer Loyalty Cannot Be Ignored. Thank you to Lockstat and IOCO for their role in putting this together. And I think one of the challenges we've all faced across a variety of businesses and industries during this global pandemic has been the sense of uncertainty across so many sectors, and retail being a major one of those. Lockdown by its very nature has had its impact on retail. But I think some of what we're going to discuss today focuses around how to retain customer loyalty, both in an online environment and then also as we come out of the COVID-induced lockdown, and how we've been able to retain customer loyalty, rebuild customer loyalty in the retail space going forward. So I, for one, absolutely fascinated by what we are going to hear today. And we have a wonderful panel who I'd like to introduce briefly before handing over to our first speaker. Amanda Kromhout is founder and CEO of Truth Loyalty. We're going to be hearing from Amanda first with some specific references to certain brands with which she has worked over this time. Sanjay Dyer is co-founder and chief marketing officer of Lockstat, who really are into big data analytics and using graph-based AI to interpret large pools of data. Varsha Ramasar from IOCO, talking data governance and taking data governance into account from POPIA to GDPR. And then Warren Bowers, who's MD of Bounty Brands Apparel and Bounty Brands. Why have a customer loyalty program in the first place? And Warren has some wonderful insights from some globally recognizable brands, which he will be talking to during the course of the webinar. So a wonderful panel assembled, and without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Amanda Kromhout from Truth Loyalty. Amanda, we look forward to you sharing your insights with us. Thank you very much.
Great, Matt. Thank you very much, and hello, everybody. So I'm just going to take you into a quick introduction. So Victoria, I really want to just help you help our clients in effect understand. We talk about the difference between customer loyalty programs or companies that actually are loyalty centric, and there's a big difference. You can't just be centrally focused on customer loyalty just because you have a loyalty program, and I think that's a critical differentiation we have to make. So during COVID-19, how is all this so different? Well, reports from players like McKinsey showed that 46% of customers tried new retailers over the COVID-19 program at time because of the trust factor. A separate study showed that 37% of consumers will try a new company during the crisis time because of how well that brand responded to the crisis. And in effect, neither of those have got anything whatsoever to do with the loyalty program. It's all about customer loyalty. So at the end of the day, brands with loyalty programs had the opportunity to create a better environment for their customers if they were able to help in tough economic times with savings and contributions, of course. And we actually saw, broadly speaking, away even from any loyalty program considerations, this massive shift towards digitization that we'll talk about and how that impacts loyalty programs. And that digitization isn't just in the shopping environment, it's in our work environment. We're doing an online webinar today, plus our children's school environment. So every touch point was hit by this. So what I'm going to quickly take you through, next slide please, Victoria, are 5 brands that we had the honor of engaging with. Some of these are our clients, some of these are folks that I was able to speak to during COVID-19, and everything they've told us is effectively what they've said to the outer world of consumers and people following them. So Mr. Price Money, what I really want to say here is they led with a digital first strategy, particularly from an accounts payment point of view. So they put in place practical channels like USSD, Mr. Price app, Zapper, online payment processes, because consumers simply couldn't go into store. And even though at the time they didn't have a loyalty program, that created more customer loyalty. The same for the Foschini Group, who's an enormous retail group with 16 million customers. 84% of their turnover goes through their loyalty program, so they are deeply embedded in loyalty. They also use this account payment digitization with SnapScan, EasyPay, new platforms they put in place and trained their call centers and actually sent out guides to their customers. That alone means more to a customer than ramming the next best offer down the customer's throat with an SMS. And that's how you build up trust. What TFG also did, which I've seen many loyalty brands do, extend the validity of your reward vouchers, extend the validity of your new account card vouchers, and actually go into partnership, maybe outside of the fashion retailing environment, go into partnership with a food group, food retailer, and offer your customers. They offered over 3 million rand worth of food vouchers to their customers at a time when customers needed in cash-strapped times. My School, My Village, My Planet probably needs no introduction to anyone in the South African market. We know that they collect funds and they distribute these funds to schools and charities, but over COVID-19, they shifted their approach and were able to offer 500,000 rand to Solidarity Fund. They are able to offer other large amounts to, for example, Gift of Givers Foundation, which actually contributes vouchers to medical frontline personnel. All of this, but it creates trust and a great, better relationship with their customers. And also remember, My School, My Village, My Planet also looks after underprivileged schools. So they were able to direct some of their efforts towards allowing underprivileged schools and the children who really couldn't get to online schooling to be able to be online schooled, because that's obviously a huge thing that's happened to everybody. So really great examples of how they just stopped necessarily the hardcore marketing and loyalty marketing, but put their efforts towards making life better for the customers. Sun International and eBucks are outside of retailing, but Sun International also contributed to the Solidarity Fund up to the tune of 2 million rand. They're one of 6 brands that are known to have given to the Solidarity Fund through the loyalty program contribution. So that 2 million rand didn't come directly from Sun itself, but they appealed to their loyalty members to contribute their MVP, which is the name of the program, MVP points, leisure points, and 15,000 customers responded. So just great to see that. And eBucks, we had the privilege of speaking with eBucks. They shifted a lot of their digital focus around how to make it easier for customers to redeem at this time on the things they really needed at the time, which are things like electricity, switching their eBucks into food or airtime and data, sort of essentials, rather than on luxuries such as travel, because eBucks is so well known also for being able to offer travel benefits, which clearly we couldn't do. So some great examples of how they shifted their effort to make lives easier and hopefully built trust with their customer base. So the next couple of slides I'm just going to quickly take you through are some nice quotations from global players who we get the pleasure of working with, how they feel brands must respond in this time of crisis. So Peter Levers in the UK, I know him very well. How can I, i.e. the company owner, be more data and insight led to recognize and analyze to the new normal and adapt appropriately? The next slide also now tells you, Kunal, a colleague of mine in India, in the current pandemic, it's critical that businesses focus on assuring their customers and building trust. So everything I told you about in the previous slide about those South African brands was all about building trust and making the life easier for their customers. Successful businesses are using their loyalty programs to showcase these aspects, and by understanding and being flexible in their benefits and range of choice and touch points. So remember I said that Foschini Group extended the validity of their rewards vouchers. This week I received an email from an airline saying, your points are about to expire. You need to fly quickly. And I'm like, are you really doing this to me at a time when we can't even, well, we can fly now, but I haven't been able to fly for the last 6 months. So it's really not a clever thing to have said at a time when actually other brands are extending the validity of their loyalty vouchers. And in the next slide, another global colleague, Sean Tan, in these difficult times, a brand's ability to drive compassion and empathy in its interaction with customers will help build stronger loyalty and affinity. So they're all saying a very similar thing. Coupled with an insight-driven approach, back to using the data, loyalty marketeers need to research, rethink about how to engage with their customers. So in summary, what I want to leave with you is, I believe that in the COVID-19 times and going forward, obviously we saw a digital adoption. That's one of the most talked about aspects of COVID-19. We saw it in the payment solutions, whether it was TFG or Mr. Price Money. We also see it in the ability to tap and go, or in the cardless environment with Zapper and SnapScan. In the experience solutions, what I mean there is brands like a Virgin Active, for example, probably struggled to get adoption of their app prior to COVID-19, or a slow adoption of the app. But opening the last month, you had to use the app to book your time in the club. And then, so that's experience solution going digital. And then commerce, e-commerce, it doesn't need much explanation from myself. But 1 in 5 South Africans are shopping online more already. We see brands like Checkers 6060 exploding into the marketplace, making our lives easier. And we see the QSR, the restaurant environment, taking digital orders in a time when we needed them, making our lives easier. And in the loyalty program space, as I said, voucher or birthday extensions, and the contrary to the airline experience that I received this week. And then I say here, the battle of the card real estate. When I am during the COVID-19, say level 5 or level 4, I literally took one credit card with me. I didn't carry my loyalty cards. So that one credit card, it may have been this brand versus that brand. It was one card. There were no loyalty cards because I wanted minimal touch points. So brands have to be smart and quick and make sure they're not losing out simply because of that impact. And then trusted communication channels. At the end of the day, if the brand responds well, like I explained, TFG educated its customers on how to pay online, that's more important than that hard-hitting marketing campaign. And brands need to become advisors, and there's a great stat that shows that 55% of respondents to a survey actually saw the brands that they trust responding better to the COVID-19 crisis than their own government. So I'm not a politician, but I'll leave that with you. My last slide just shows very simply that effectively loyalty, Victoria, the last slide, please. Loyalty is about, sorry, previous slide. About actually how loyalty programs make you feel. It's about the emotion you have with them, not just about the transaction of points. How you make your customers feel has a bigger impact than the rands and cents value of the loyalty points. Thank you very much.
Amanda, I've got a quick couple of questions for you, if you don't mind, from the moderator. The first one is, we're going to watch this space, but I assume that that airline has now become a client of Truth. Would that be fair?
I can't say, but yeah, I can't say, but those who know me know I'm from the airline industry, so it's a touchy point.
But the second one, a slightly more serious question, is a word. I'm going to discuss it with Varsha in some more detail, but I'd like your take on it before we move on to Sanjay. A word that came up consistently is trust. And trust is a two-way street between the consumer and the retailer or the loyalty program. And one of the things we're going to discuss with Varsha is trusting the process of using your data for your benefit. So how important is that in your world?
Oh, it's huge. In our loyalty white paper with Brand Map, which is available on our website, we actually asked that question exactly about how do you feel about us using your data in the loyalty space. And there's quite a mixed emotion actually from the South African public around, it's really split between some customers who absolutely hate it and say you cannot do it and I don't want you to do it. And others that say, you know what, it's okay as long as you deliver me a better personalized experience. As long as you make my life better, I'm okay with you doing it as long as you do it responsibly, transparently, and in a trustworthy way. So there's really mixed emotions. There isn't a middle ground here. So we, as brands, we have to be able to cater for both of those.
So around retail and around customer loyalty, there is obviously a huge amount of data, and data analytics has become such a critical business tool. We're going to move on to our next presenter now, who is Sanjay Dyer of Lockstat. And I've had a couple of engagements with Sanjay and his team at Lockstat, and where they've been particularly successful is in reducing churn, also identifying fraudulent transactions, but mainly through their technology's ability to analyze large pools of data in real time and provide their clients with some really well qualified recommendations based on what they're seeing in the data. So Sanjay, one of the co-hosts of the webinar today, over to you, and we look forward to what you have to tell us about Lockstat.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so as Matt said, I'm one of the co-founders of Lockstat Systems, and Lockstat started developing graph-powered visual analytics around 2010. And due to our experience in that, we are South Africa's foremost experts in applying graph database technologies in South Africa. And our ambition at Lockstat is to democratize this technology, to make it available to any business so that in an affordable and flexible manner, they can be quickly deployable. We're a private company based in Cape Town, and all our software is developed in South Africa. So I've mentioned graph a few times. Now, graph is not a chart in an Excel spreadsheet. What a graph is just a mathematical construct of connecting nonlinear pieces of information in data sets to create networks. And I'll explain a bit more of that. But I encourage anybody that's on this webinar to go and look it up, because it really is the future of analytics and AI. Victoria, if you could go to the next slide, please. So, this is a COVID webinar, and, we've all been severely impacted by COVID in the retail trade. So how do we fix it, for one? And let's look at some of the companies that did really well during COVID. And most important part of this is around recommendations. So Steve Jobs once said, a lot of times people don't know what they want until you show them. So I'm sure during lockdown, a lot of you have been watching Netflix, and there's a program that's come up called The Social Dilemma. And I know a lot of people have been shocked by the deep insights that social media companies have on your behavior and how they influence your behavior. But what wasn't explained in this webinar was the technology that is used to achieve this. Now, this technology is also used by companies such as Amazon, Spotify, and Netflix. And all these companies rely on a product stack that is cloud-based, using big data and graph-powered AI. Now, this allows companies to predict and reduce churn by segmenting their customers and then recommending the correct offer or product to ensure the customer does not churn. Now, for example, 64% of Americans have Amazon Prime. And taking into consideration, only 51% bother to vote. So it's quite significant. McKinsey estimates that 35% of all products sold on Amazon is a result of a recommendation. Now, similarly, Netflix has 200 million paying subscribers. 80% of the titles you watch on Netflix is driven by recommendations. So these companies are able to take every data point and improve their algorithms in real time to personalize the journey and to increase the trust that you have in their recommendations. Now, recommendations is a form of trust, and it builds a relationship, which helps prevent churn. And humans naturally feed off positive relationships. It really makes us happy. The next slide, please. Yeah, so David Smith is an Investec analyst on retail, and he brought up three pertinent points. The first point he says there is, there's big players are consolidating in the market. Amanda made reference to TFG, and we all know that in the news, they've acquired many of the Edcon stores. And TFG is a massive business. They are capable of applying some of these technologies in-house. So, as a medium to large business, if you're not one of the 2 or 3 big companies in South Africa or around the world, you really don't have the budgets around building these technologies. So it's critical to get your data from offline to online. Now that's whether you haven't had e-commerce before, you need to move into that, or digitizing your loyalty program. These are going to be critical over the next 10 years in surviving and keeping up with the really, really big players like Amazon. This does, as I said, make it smaller for these small players to compete if they do not invest in similar technologies. And this is exactly what Lockstat does. What we do is we provide the same technologies that Amazon have to give it to large, even small companies, and help them to develop it, because it really is very hard to develop this yourself. The next slide, please. So as the picture grows, you can see when the picture started, there were a few gaps in the picture, and what we're trying to get to is customer 360. Now, currently, business intelligence and CRM tools can simply not give you a full picture of your customer. They do certainly form part of the solution, but these technologies cannot provide timely information, and they certainly cannot include every relevant data source. Only by bringing this data together can you enable customer 360. Now, before you start that, you need to start to do churn prediction or churn upliftment. One has to first dismantle the data silos in the business so that all departments have access to these data. Now, for example, you've got marketing, you've got sales, you've got finance. All of this has to be brought into one space so that you can work with this data. And in that, you create trust with the data. You create transparency with the data. And then you can connect your investments to the outcomes as information becomes transparent in the organization, which ultimately benefits your customer and creates compliance, which Varsha is going to touch on in the next presentation. Just click through, Victoria. So, sorry, just one back. Yeah, so you want to enable predictive analytics to prevent churn and retain customers. And this is only possible by having a 360 view of your customer. Thanks, you can go through. Right, so the presentation was titled Churn Prediction, or using data to prevent churn, but as you can see, there's quite a few processes before you can even get to the point of churn prediction. And there are a few critical steps that have to be put in place first. One is choosing the right system, 2 is the right architecture, and then being able to segment your customers correctly. Only once you've overcome those challenges and you can apply a recommendation engine to offer the right product at the right time, can you start predicting and preventing churn. Now, as you can see on the slide here, we've got a quadrant of different customers, different types of customers within your target market. Now, these customers, all of them don't have to be marketed to. As Amanda said, not everybody needs millions of SMSs being sent to them, expecting a result from every single one of your customers. There is no mass market retention program that should be out there, because every customer behaves in a different manner. So in this example here of a new way of looking at the customer behavior, we have 4 quadrants. So the do not disturb customer is a customer that will actually churn faster if you engage with them. And I'll give you an example. If you are on a cell phone contract and you just renew it every year and you forget about it, and you may not be using all the full amount of your data. If somebody tries to retain you a month before to remind you that your credit card, your cell phone contract is about to expire, you may in fact cancel that and move to pay as you go, for example. You have the lost causes. No matter what you do, they will not react to a retention marketing. Now you've wasted an SMS, you've got contingent liability sitting in vouchers in your income statement and balance sheet. And then you've got the sure things, which are your great customers, and they're the opportunities more around upselling and cross-selling, not trying to retain them. They are good customers of yours. And then you've got persuadables, which are the customers that you want to spend your attention on. And in that, you can now market segment them to a really granular degree and pay more attention to that to get more bang for your buck. This will save significant marketing costs, but you can only do this if you have applied the previous 4 slides in terms to get to your market segmentation and using the right recommendations, using artificial intelligence and machine learning in your big data environment. You can give me the next slide, please, there. So how do we do this? So firstly, Lockstat has a unique platform that most companies are trying to develop this internally. We offer it as a third-party solution. And part of that is that we are quickly deployable. We've got 10 years of experience in doing this and have got proven capability in multiple customers. So what we do is we take disparate data sets, whether it's your POS system, your customer database, social media feeds, loyalty systems in this regard, and we fuse and enrich this data so that we can put it into a unified data storage area. And then we put it into a graph data set, which is the magic in the middle, which is our product called Lightweaver. Now, graph database provides capabilities that are really difficult to do in SQL databases. And this is an important point. Because if you ask your CTO, can I get this information? And you may say, yes, but you've got a BI tool. Now, BI tools cannot do this. And if he says it can, the simple question is, why don't I have it already? And what graphing does, we can weight the graph's edges and vertices and create features engineered for your customer data sets, which will run churn models on your data sets, segment your customers, recommend the right product to the customer about to churn on a very granular level, and predictive, not afterwards. And you can also set rules based on churn models to monitor for this in real time and recommend the necessary actions to prevent the churn. So at Lockstat, we offer this. We are a South African company, and taking into account there's no dollar-based subscription fees. We're a SaaS solution, which makes us flexible, and we have you up and running in 8 weeks. So the reality is that every company needs to unlock the potential in your data, especially your hidden data that you don't know is there. And failure, unfortunately, is just going to mean the big companies like Amazon are just going to get further and further ahead. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Sanjay. It's a fascinating space, this real-time data analytics. You get graphing big pools of data and making recommendations as a consequence, which does move us seamlessly into our next presenter, Varsha from IOCO, because data governance then becomes a major issue. How secure is your data? How much permission have you given for your data to be used? But the flip side, Varsha, as you're going to tell us, is if it is used correctly and within agreed parameters, this really can be a very, very powerful tool indeed.
No, definitely, indeed. Thanks, Matt. So guys, this is probably the least, exciting bit, I guess, of the data world. You know, everyone's talking about the analytics, the data science bits, machine learning, etc. And sometimes we forget about the basics. So what I'm sharing with you is a bit more around the compliance requirements, how that impacts data, and what does that mean for you. So if you could move on to the next slide. These are the common words we keep hearing. So when COVID hit us, we had Zoom, Teams, all of those things happening, but GDPR and POPIA also came up top of mind. One of the reasons around this was that POPIA was actually promulgated this year. It's been years in the making, but now it has actually become part of our law. And with COVID, there's been a lot of requirements for additional data from people. So it's raised an awareness with our consumers around, you know, why they ask me for this information, location information, travel information, etc. So on the one side, it's created that awareness of POPIA is real, it impacts me in my life, and it's created questions with our clients and consumers around, you know, what does this mean? Does the government really have access to this information, and should they? And these retailers that I'm attending or working in their stores, etc., you know, should I be sharing this information? What does it mean when I'm putting my name down on a list in a restaurant to say, hey, I'm sitting here today? That should all feel like very confidential information. So all of these questions and all of the sourcing of new data has just brought all of this top of mind and made it more real. The benefit or the bigger picture around this is that for people who have been working in data, GDPR and POPIA are not really something that's new. It's actually just good data governance principles that need to be implemented. And for those people who love data and are the data evangelists in your organizations, This actually creates an impetus for a business case around getting better data practices in place. If we could pop into the next one. So again, people go, these are just buzzwords. Is it real? But if we take a look at what is happening in the world, there have been significant breaches. And while in South Africa, we still have up to a year to become compliant with POPIA, where breaches have occurred, there's already been reputational damage. The financial implications may not have hit clients as yet, or the people that have been impacted, but that is coming. If we think about what has been happening in the world, what happened with Experian definitely impacted from a brand perspective. And a similar situation which happened in the US actually resulted in a $700 million fine. That's the type of figures that we'd be working with should a breach occur. If we look at the Zurich situation, it was about 46,000 records that were exposed. So for the 46,000 records, the penalty was £500,000. These are serious numbers. And at a time when we're trying to manage our reputation, create trust, these things just do not serve us in creating loyalty with our customers and clients. So the flip side to this, to what Matt alluded to, Sanjay did, and Amanda as well, is about trust and good business practice. Sorry, could you pop back? So when we say it's good for business, what do we actually mean about this? Getting it right with good data principles gives you a competitive advantage. The other thing people are talking about, especially once COVID hit, was how do you automate your processes? How do you bring intelligent automation in play? Getting good automation working is all about having good data and the right data in there. So if you want to automate that phone call to a client and offer them the right type of product, you need to ensure that you understand all the transactions around that client. You've got the latest information, which talks to good data quality, and then you've got the right lead that you're generating. So that talks to the right message, to the right consumer, driving a value exchange. I cannot emphasize value exchange enough. When it comes to an individual sharing the information with you to enable you to create this, it's all about you adding value to their lives, whether it's through a process efficiency or it's a better value add or something that's tailored to what they need. It's also about looking at a client holistically and the potential of that client. So I remember a few years ago when Investec was looking at individuals, and though the individuals did not meet the criteria to become an Investec client, they actually looked at the potential of that individual based on historical studies, the person's track record in businesses, almost like their CV. And from that could understand that a tailored package and bringing this person on board would actually lead to a very long and sustainable relationship with them. The third point is around fewer leads and better quality, and then leading to better conversion. So we sometimes chase the wrong number. We think that we need 100,000 leads to be generated, but it's actually about the quality of those leads, which leads to a better quality interaction, and then an improved conversion rate. So when we talk about SMSs going out, that's another cost efficiency. If you have fewer SMSs going to the right people with the right product, again, you're introducing efficiencies into your business. And the last bit gets a bit more technical around cost savings. If we think about these volumes of data hitting us, different data serves different purposes. And part of POPIA and GDPR is also understanding when to archive that data, who should be accessing it, etc. So these types of good data management principles enable us to do the right things with data and immediately create things like storage improvements. So that's actually critical in a time like this, where we're trying to create better savings and better profits. We can pop over. And I think all of this just comes together around consumer trust. So the questions we sit with, and when we're trying to address this whole challenge around POPIA and GDPR, is around, what is the data that we have? What are we doing with it? Do we really need all this data? As a data person, I'm going to say yes. But then again, it goes to how you use it. And all of these questions seem like, these should be simple questions. We should have the answers to this. Once you start diving a little bit deeper, you start to question, okay, do I really understand what is the sensitive nature of the data that I have? Am I obfuscating this information? Do I have it in the right places? And I guess most importantly, should a data breach occur, do I understand and does my organization have a process to address this? We can swap to the next. So if you're sitting there asking yourself right now, where do I start with this? There's so much to do, and it's quite a big challenge. It's nothing that's simple. If this was easy, all the best data management principles would have been in place already, because the principles themselves are not new. They're all about understanding where's my data, who's doing what with it, what are the transformations occurring with it, and how do I end the life cycle of this data. So if we click on the next one, the key areas that I would suggest to you or recommend that you do start in is having an opt-in and opt-out functionality, especially with loyalty programs where you are addressing the consumer directly. It's important to enable them to have the power in their hands. So they need the ability to opt in and out of whatever you're offering, and it needs to be broad enough, but also specific enough, kind of the polarity of the two, so that where it's operationally in their best interest and it's offering them something that gives them a better product, a better service, that is very clearly articulated to the client so that there's no reflex action in just opting out. I think as Amanda alluded to, it can be a very emotional discussion with the client, because people sometimes feel like, why should someone know so much about my data? So articulating very clearly what you're opting into and what you're opting out of, with the clear benefits of being opted in, becomes absolutely critical in how you engage with the client. The other parts are around data classification and data quality. One of the biggest challenges is, the data is like an ocean. So you need to start somewhere and understand what is my sensitive information, what is my private information. If you cannot get that right, you're unable to address a data breach because you actually don't understand the size of the problem when this does hit you. And all of this ties in with educating staff and everyone who's interacting with clients. It starts with each of us, that we need to understand what is the value of the data we have, that it is an asset, that it impacts an individual consumer, and that we treat it with the respect and responsibility that it requires. Cool, so I think that is me. We have a saying in data that, if you torture the data, it will tell you anything that you want it to say. So again, it comes back to, it's not about us influencing the data, but it's about us allowing ourselves to get the data up there, using things like graph technologies that enable us to see the patterns in that data and then create something meaningful for our consumers. Cool, I think that is me.
Varsha, thank you very much. I think you raise a fascinating point at the end there around the value of data. And unfortunately, in some ways, we have to acknowledge that data has become an extremely valuable and tradable commodity, which has led to a whole sequence of cybersecurity breaches, which is a topic all on its own, and one which we probably have to look into in more detail when we are discussing issues of data security, trust between brands and retailers and clients. So some excellent food for thought. I'd just like to encourage our participants before I introduce Warren, if you do have questions, we've still got just about 20 minutes of time for Warren and then to take any questions. So if you have any questions for our panelists, Amanda, Sanjay, Varsha, or Warren, please feel free to share those on the chat or Q&A function. So Warren, over to you at Bounty Brands, and what a challenging time for you, but also some wonderful brands that you have worked with, globally recognized brands, which presumably have a sort of inherent loyalty in them, but one which you can never take for granted.
Absolutely. Challenging times indeed, Matt. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all the participants. When I started in this role just more than a year ago, one of the first deliverables I was given was to implement a loyalty program. And I got together with the various brand managers of the brands in our portfolio, and they enthusiastically dived straight in after the brief, went to market, looked at potential vendors, and as a matter of fact, we were about to go to proof of concept with pilots when we actually realized that we weren't clear on why we were doing it, what we wanted the program to look like, how we were going to measure the success of it, and it became apparent to us clearly on that we needed some help. And we then got Amanda and a team in just to help us crystallize our thinking on what it is we wanted out of the program. Victoria, can you click to the next slide? One more. There just seems to be a lag on the slide. Victoria, can you maybe click through? Yep. We then got Amanda and the team in, and she identified 6 reasons as to why brands generally would implement a loyalty program. We identified with 5 of those. Certainly the first one was to acquire and enrich our existing customer data. We wanted to have incremental sales. We didn't think that brand awareness was a priority, as we believe our brands are very well known and fairly recognizable. We certainly wanted to retain customers, and particularly our high value customers. We wanted to recognize and reward them, and we wanted to build a customer-centric approach to our business. So once we understood the what of the program, we then needed to define what it was that we wanted out of the program, what it needed to look like. Apologies, there seems to be a delay on the slide presentation. Victoria, can you maybe click through for me, please? Yep. We then realized that what we needed, apologies guys, there seems to be a delay with the slide. I'm going to click right through and hopefully bring it all up. Victoria, can you maybe take control and click through? There we go. Yep. So historically, programs in the past, the objectives of existing programs is to manage attrition and increase reward, where we believe the program we're looking for needs to focus on driving high value behaviors and profitable spend. Historically, investments were determined, investments were determined based on the program's overall fiscal average. What we're looking for is to align investments based on individual incremental value creation. Programs, the value proposition of existing programs tends to focus largely on rational benefits that are purely transactional based, whereas we believe programs in the future need to provide rational and emotional benefits, with personalization being key. The engagement strategy of the past used to focus on one or many calendar-based promotional activities, where we believe our programs need to operate as always on, behaviorally triggered, and one-to-one life cycle campaigns. How do you measure the success of these programs? Well, traditionally they were run on long learning cycles with difficulty in pinpointing the incrementality, whereas we believe in the future you need to adopt a test and learn approach to isolate the incremental EBITDA of individual promotions. So essentially, our loyalty point of view is that personalization is going to be critical. You have to focus on incremental value versus rewarding existing behavior. There needs to be a balance between the rational and the emotional benefits that you offer. Costs need to be aligned to the potential value of each customer to maximize the profitability of the program. You have to motivate high value behaviors in addition to spend. You have to embrace continuous testing and optimizing of the framework. You have to eliminate the silos and try to centralize the customer data. And you have to realize, as all the previous presenters alluded to, CRM systems on their own cannot give you a customer 360 view. And you have to understand the current state of the consumer at the moment you're interacting with them. That's me in a nutshell, Nat.
Warren, thank you. I'm going to pick up on a couple of things there, if I may. So in terms of optimizing customer experience in real time, I mean, I know that you and Sanjay have collaborated, and you've mentioned that you've collaborated with Amanda. But this real-time data analytics is presumably a bit of a game changer, given your new set of criteria. As against the traditional ones that you've mentioned, and being able to have these large pools of data which you can get a response from in real time allows you a whole new set of opportunity.
Absolutely, Matt, and that is essentially the holy grail of loyalty programs at the moment. We need real live analytics and data, not retrospectively looking back of transactional data based on a month, a year. We want predictive data to be able to engage in a meaningful and relevant way to our consumers.
And I guess also looking at the brands that your business represents, there's presumably a lot of cross-pollination there, which you would be able to feed off.
Well, that's exactly one of the reasons that we embarked on this journey. We have these 5 powerful brands, and we have no insights into the cross-pollination of shopping currently within our existing customer base. And it's one of the key deliverables we'd expect out of a loyalty program, is to give us those insights in real time, preferably.
Amanda, I'd love to come to you at picking out of something that Warren said as well. You and I spoke about this when we were chatting before the webinar, that wonderful quote, and I should really reference it, shouldn't I? I'll have to go and have a look somewhere quickly. But people will quickly forget what you say and what you do, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. Yeah. So Warren talked about the emotional connection in building trust and loyalty. Has that been overlooked? And is it a key area for improvement?
It definitely gets overlooked, Matt. So many brands that we work with, or so many brands I see when you use loyalty programs, they just focus on the rand and cents of the transaction. So the real winners for me are those that are able to, we call it engagement, are able to engage with you where you need to be as well, not just about how much you're spending. So, what are your pain points? How does the brand help you with these? And because I'm a loyalty member, they make it so much easier. But in response, I therefore give more of myself to that brand. So it's a two-way street, right? It's not just about what can the consumer take or what can the brand take. We did a webinar actually last week with Wendy Nola, and the consumer journalist, and Wendy, she was great actually. She said one of the key things she said was the slide that Warren showed was, she didn't see that slide, but what she said was, for anyone out there who's thinking of doing a loyalty program, seriously think about how you're going to make the life better and how you're going to make your customers feel before you start to put a strategy around how much money it's going to make you. But we're also not naive to the fact that it's got to be commercially viable, otherwise you won't invest in it. So again, it's a two-way street.
Yeah, interesting to hear Warren say right at the front of his presentation, we were about to push the button and then we said, why? It's probably the most important question.
We always start with why. So Warren and his team experienced that. We never ever start with any other question. It's always, well, why do you actually want to do this?
Yeah. There's a question on the group from Frick Brits. Thank you, Frick. He says, customers expect loyalty to not be bound or limited to international borders. For example, if I'm buying something in South Africa and receiving loyalty points, I expect the same when traveling to or out of Dubai and shopping at the same store. Most brands don't have this setup, and you have to sign up again, leaving you with being a member twice of the same brand. How high on the priority list is this to brands, and how easy or not is it to enable this?
I can answer that if you like.
Sure, thanks.
It's a great question. It's a really difficult thing for brands to implement typically because of cross-border currencies. and also localization. So you've got local nuances. So Warren and his team actually see this because they've got such phenomenal global brands, and they'll find that maybe globally the brand has said, right, this is our loyalty program, please implement it everywhere. But then there's real nuances that don't fit the local market. So I think there's times like an airline, for example, when they get it right, not the example I gave you, when it works for it to be purely global and a single currency almost works. But I think there are times when localization is much more important. But having said that, if I'm buying from Vans, let's take one of Warren's brands, you know, in New York versus Cape Town, should it be any different? Really, it is a global brand. But as a South African, I mean, I'm not South African, but as a person in South Africa, maybe there's different things I need from the brand than a New Yorker might need. So it's a great debate. And whoever asked that question, I'm really sorry it's not more simple. It is a complex debate.
Yeah, I think, Frick, you mentioned Dubai. Frick, I know you can't respond to this, but maybe when you bought those 6 Toblerones at Dubai duty free, get something off one at the engine when you got back. But Warren, have you got a comment on that? I mean, obviously, these are the brands that you represent are truly global. Just you're on mute.
Matt, Frick Brits is actually an ex-colleague of mine. Hi there, Frick. Thanks for throwing me that rugby pass. Matt, I'm not the subject matter expert on loyalty programs, and I'll leave that, as Amanda alluded to, it's a very complex one to respond to.
Yeah, sure. A couple more questions. We do have a few minutes left. Dion was just actually commenting on that last question. The international solution works well for card issuers and banks. Fair enough, yeah. Earning and burning of e-bucks, for example, you know, wherever you're spending on a card, you know, the card issuer is in a central place. Alicia, I hope Alicia, apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but I believe it's Alicia, from a marketing consultancy company. What I find is that many big retailers that collect huge amounts of data through various programs are not actually using it to their full benefit. Still very little personalized experience and properly targeted communication from retailers. Proper segmentation and targeting is critical, but still it feels big retailers are not maximizing the opportunity. Perhaps I can come to a combination of Sanjay and Varsha here, because Sanjay, you would argue that that your technology allows for that kind of segmentation and to build customer profile, while Varsha would also say, just be careful not to overreach in the use of that data and where it's perhaps not applicable.
Yeah, so, you know, our experience specifically in South Africa is that people really, the only way to do this successfully is using graph. And graph, experience of graph and development in graph is very, very limited in South Africa. And so a lot of people are relying on legacy technologies such as SQL databases, disparate in pieces of information, as I alluded to in my presentation. And simply then what happens is there's missing bits. It takes development time of 2 weeks to a month. They get the information is out of date, and you're back to square one. And that is all, obviously, that is where we see the opportunity for Lockstat. And obviously, you know, even if, I don't know the size of this company, but even the biggest companies that we've engaged with are really struggling to move that legacy systems into cloud, and Bosha and them are very involved with companies like that as well, where they have the necessary full stack development skills and resources to fix this problem at the moment.
Varsha, perhaps you can add something to that. And also, you did say you could speak briefly to Frick's question on how easy or otherwise to do to set up across international borders.
Yeah, so I think, again, it comes down to a bit of foundational work with data. So if you want to go across the borders, you need to understand the context from a geography perspective. So if we bring it back to GDPR and POPIA, they actually are very similar. The main difference around the data principles is understanding that that individual either has a passport in another country, or that person is a foreigner, and I handle their data in a different way. So at the drop of a hat, if I had to say, give me all clients who are currently in the UK, I can actually pull that information out. Right now, if we look at the way systems are created, and a lot of this is legacy applications, it's not as easy to get that view. And part of it goes down to the data design. So when I architected the solution in the beginning, did I even have a placeholder that said this person might have dual citizenship, as an example? Do you know what I mean? So it goes back to how did we classify this information? Do we have the right info? So to Frick's question about how hard it is, it really goes back to the original design of these systems and how agile and flexible they are to actually enable this new bits of data coming in, and how rich in metadata they can become. And metadata is just our data about data. Kind of linking it to what Dion Olivia asked as well about, retail being the challenge, but the solution works for banks. Part of that is because banks were so legislated, good data management has kind of been a big part of their build anyway, before all of this started. And though sometimes it may seem like they're a slow-moving machine, part of getting that foundation right now gives them flexibility to do things like these international transactions. So I guess the philosophy is almost sometimes you've got to go a little bit slow to go fast. At the same time, where Lockstat comes in is while you're doing that foundational bit, you can then still play in the advanced analytics space and start seeing the value. And that value feeds back into fixing the data in the back end, because the end result is I'll have a better churn model with better lift if I have better data quality. That creates a business case to say, if my lift could be, I'm going to retain X amount of clients, save X amount of money. Let's go back, fix the root cause on the data, bring it back into the models, improve the models. It's this continuous cycle. And I think that's what's quite important. It's all an ecosystem. It's not just a point thing with data. Hope that makes sense.
No, it does. Varsha, thank you for that. Time has flown by, and thank you to our participants. This is going to be made available as a recording. I know that. I know, Amanda, you are under some time pressure, so thank you very, very much for staying on. And I think you might need to jump off to your next call. But what has been clear to me is how deep a topic this is and how many components there are to it. But also the expertise that is available to us on this call alone. So the experts in the different components, and if we can pull them together, I think there are some potentially very strong outcomes. So thank you again to IOCO and to Lockstat for hosting, to Amanda, to Warren, Varsha, Sanjay for your presentations and your fielding of the questions. Thank you all very much, and thank you all for joining. I'm sure there'll be more from whence this came. Have a great afternoon.